Well, good morning, Larry. We have Larry Golding with us here for our initial interview of our ACSM Legacy Project. And what we're going to do is just have a little chat here this morning about Larry's career and how that career grew and intersected with the American College of Sports Medicine. And a little later then, in particular, Larry's involvement with the Fitness Summit and ACSM's Fitness Magazine and so forth. So welcome, Larry. And
thank you.
Where did all this start?
Well, I was still a graduate student when I joined ACSM as a student member. That was in 1960. And it's interesting because somebody asked me the other day about the early meetings. And when I first went to ACSM, it was almost totally a male-dominated meeting. There were hardly any females. And through the years, of course, the females in the field have grown because there weren't very many people in the field of exercise physiology, sports medicine. And now we're probably 50-50.
It's close 50-50
yeah, right.
now. Yeah.
So it's been interesting to see that change. So I started going to annual meetings, and in the last 46 years, I know I've missed one. And I've seen it grow. It was interesting because I was very much involved with the National YMCA and did a lot of their training, and I still do. I still do 5 one-week workshops with their professionals, certifying them for their program. And I also helped to write the National YM program. So the Y kept my feet on the ground as far as being too much of an ivory tower university professor. And I was very much involved in the actual fitness field. And at the university, I've always run an adult exercise class.
Now, what university?
I started off at Kent State University in Ohio, and I was there for 18 years. And then 30 years ago, I went to UNLV, University of Nevada, Las Vegas.
Okay.
And we have a women's program that meets every day and a men's program that meets every day, and I lead that.
I see.
And that's strictly to collect data on the effect of exercise on aging. So I've kept my feet in the practical field as well as the academics. So when Tim White was president and they were talking a little bit about another journal, LW&W, who publishes the MSSE, did some market research, and they found out that nearly all people in the whole fitness field felt that ACSM was the best organization. But when they asked if they belonged to it, they said no. And they said, well, why? And they said, well, they offer us nothing. We can't read their journal because it's too sophisticated. And we go to their annual meeting, and it's all scientific things that we have nothing to do with. So their last question, which was obviously the marketing question, was if ACSM had a journal that was written for the practitioner and in English, would you subscribe? And of course they all said yes. So they went to the Board of Regents and suggested having a journal for this population of people who were interested in sports medicine and exercise, but were not scientists.
Right.
So Tim White took that to the Board of Regents, and they thought it was worth looking into. And he happened to ask me whether I would be the editor-in-chief of it because I was involved with the fitness side of it. And I was flattered and glad to do it. And so we started, that was now 10 years ago, the ACSM's Health and Fitness Journal.
Larry, did that precede the summit?
Yes, the summit came out of it.
Okay.
You see, when they had this marketing research, they said if we join, we get their magazine we can't read. If we go to the annual meeting, that's all scientific. So we said, well, if you had a journal, would you subscribe? And then they thought, well, if they have a journal, they need an annual meeting.
Oh, sure.
And so they decided to have an annual meeting, which they then called ACSM's Health and Fitness Summit and Exposition. And again, it had the same philosophy. They wanted science, but they wanted it given in English and not science, and talking about practical problems. And it has. Through the years, our attendance at the summit has steadily grown, and the evaluations we get from the summit says that we really are doing what we were supposed to do, and that's giving them things they needed that were practical and yet still scientifically accurate. And so I feel that ACSM 10 years ago made that giant step forward into another area of definitely sports medicine, but not the MD, Ph.D. group of people, but people who certainly, one, thought they were very good, and secondly, looked at them as being the most credible organization.
And probably a lot of those people had been ACSM certified anyhow.
A lot of them have been certified, and then they started, the second year of that, or the third year, I forget which, they started then the alliance membership, so that these same people could now belong to ACSM, which they couldn't believe before because they couldn't qualify for the membership.
Absolutely.
So they made this alliance membership so people could say, I do belong to ACSM, and they didn't yet lower their standards in a sense, because I think there were people on the board of trustees who weren't real gung-ho about it. They said, well, we're a scientific organization and educational, and we don't want to become a spandex group. And I think and people agreed with that. And I think that after the first year of the journal, every one of the articles that appeared in the first year were all done by fellows. And they were all people who were doing scientific work, but they were now interpreting their work.
Absolutely.
So that the practice...
So they could use it.
They could use it and understand it.
Yeah.
And so it's really turned out to be a real successful thing.
Okay, Larry, one of the other things that I wanted to chat to you about was your early education and graduate school and who you worked with and basically how you got into this field in the first place.
Well, I don't know whether you know it or not, but I was a foreign student. I was born in South Africa.
I did not know that.
And the boys' school I went to really believed in physical education. They used to bring people out from Europe to teach PE, and I was really impressed with them. And I also swam competitively. So all my life I knew I was going to go somehow into physical education, and being in South Africa I thought I'd go to England. Well, I graduated in 1945 from high school, which was the end of World War II, and England was not taking any outsiders until they took care of the returning servicemen, so I couldn't go there. And so then I decided to come to the States. And I came to the States and went to the University of Illinois. And I ended up getting all 3 degrees there. And Seward Staley, who was then the dean, by far wrote me the nicest letter. So I went over there. As I said, did my 3 degrees. Between my master's and my Ph.D., I taught briefly at the University of Idaho in Moscow, and then went back and finished. And then as soon as I got my Ph.D., and I did it with T.K. Curitan, who was kind of the father of physical fitness, and I think that's where my fitness side of me came in.
And he was big in the YMCA.
And he was also big in the YMCA, and he had an adult exercise class that more or less mine follows right now, and all of the graduate students had to be in that. And so he sort of really brainwashed most of his students into that kind of area. So when I finished with my PhD, I went to Kent State University in Ohio, and they were wanting to start an exercise physiology degree and a laboratory. And so that was I was hired for, and I did. I started a laboratory, we started a program, we had a master's program, then a PhD program, and we turned out, I think, 20 PhDs in exercise phys, who are today really some of the leaders in the field, which is very, very flattering and nice to know. And then in 1976, University of Nevada wanted to do exactly the same thing. They wanted to start an exercise physiology program. They wanted to start a laboratory. And the person who was the head of the department at Nevada at that time had done graduate work at Kent. And so he called me and said, we'd like you to come out here. And I said, hey, I'm going to die at Kent. I'm not about to move. And he said, well, just come out and take a vacation and look at us.
Yeah.
So my wife and I went out there, and everything I saw, I really liked. People were nice. The president, I said to him, you have any idea what this is going to cost to start a lab? And he said, what will it cost? I said, I don't know either, but I said, it's going to cost a lot. He said, fine, we'll go.
Isn't that great?
And it was so positive.
What an opportunity.
And, and at Kent, they had the shootings, and education was at the bottom of the totem pole. And so, I just suddenly decided in Easter that I'd start there in the fall. So I started at UNLV in the fall of '76, and I've been there ever since. And we've got a good exercise physiology program, a good lab.
It's nice when you have that commitment from the president down.
Yes, definitely.
You remember some of your classmates at Illinois? That was quite a crew, wasn't it?
Well,
that's a who's who.
That's right. And being there for so long, I know that Van Haas and Montoy and those people were a little bit ahead of me, but those were the people who began making a real dent in our field.
Oh, absolutely.
And for a while, until those people went out and started to get students. Almost every laboratory was run by an ex-University of Illinois person.
Yeah.
And then, of course, slowly they began putting out people, and then it sort of just mushroomed from there. But yeah, that's the only other disappointing thing about ACSM, is that as we've gotten bigger, we've also become a little more impersonal.
Yeah.
I can remember going to ACSM and knowing everybody, and now it's got so big, and we've got good people, but it's just no chance to sometimes get to know them. And then when we do get here, it's so damn busy, you don't get a chance to socialize.
That's right.
Which is unfortunate.
Yeah, Curitin had just a fantastic record
Oh, he
of
was
students.
a human dynamo.
Yeah.
And there are more stories about Curitin.
Oh, I bet.
And even last night I was with a group of them, and we were talking, and everyone has a funny story about TK. He was just he was an unbelievable man. He really was.
Larry, one of the other things that I wanted to talk to you a little bit more in depth about is I know you knew D.B. Dill, and of course you were a student of T.K. Curitin, and if you could maybe chat a little bit about those two guys and what they meant in the field and your remembrances about them.
Well, first looking at TK, I think that Curitin, he really did. He turned out a whole bunch of people that became the core of ACSM, became the core of the field. And then, of course, those people then started developing their own people as well. But I think that he was really one of the, I think that he was almost ahead of his time. I mean, he wrote his book on, I forget now what the name of it was, but that first book he put out.
It had fitness in the title, I think,
yeah, it had,
in the 40s,
physical
in the
fitness
mid-40s.
appraisal and guidance.
Yeah, I think it was 1945.
Yeah, and it was really above its time, and you know, and people didn't even understand what he was talking about. So I think he really was, and then of course Bruno Balke began turning out students like he did, and
he was at Wisconsin.
Wisconsin, right? And then of course Karpovich was at Springfield, beginning to turn out people, but not as many Ph.D.s as TK turned out. And TK was really known for adult fitness, and I think that he really was, in a sense, the father of adult fitness. I think there's no question about it. And even though Cooper came much later and got a lot of the credit, because at that time TK, you know, just didn't have the publicity that Ken Cooper had. Interestingly about Dill, who really was the father of sports medicine and exercise physiology, being the first director of the Harvard Fatigue Laboratory. You know, he retired 3 times. He retired from there
right?
During World War II. He was at the Army Chemical Warfare, where he was the director of that. And then he retired from there, and he went with his old student, Sid Robertson, at Indiana, and worked there for a while, then retired again. And then he came out to UNLV. And he started a laboratory and was an emeritus professor in the biology department. That's when I got to know him and began doing some research with Mo Yusuf and him. And I had DB talk to most of my graduate classes every semester, and he was just a fantastic man. He died at the age of 93, and he was writing 3 manuscripts at that time. You know, I mean, he was just unbelievably productive. And DB, there's a lot of funny stories about him as well, being one of those early ones. And every year, and if you look at any of his publications where he has graphs of like max VO2s, you'll see DB on there, one of the dots. It's him. He always was part of it. And he used to get a max VO2 done every year. And when he was 91, he said to me, I want to do a max VO2. And I said, well, as long as we have a physician present, we'll do a max VO2. And so he came in one day, and he was ready, and he said, okay, I'm ready to do it. And I said, well, who's coming in? He said, oh, Dr. Vitez is coming in, who's an anesthesiologist, but he is an MD. And he said, he'll be here. And I said, well, let's wait for him. He said, no, we got to get started. And DB he had running shoes on, but he was in his street clothes, and we put the EKG on him, got on the treadmill, got the mouthpiece in, and I said, well, let's just wait. And he said, keep going. He couldn't talk because he had his mouthpiece in. And he began to do it. And I had then realized that he probably never did ask Vitez.
Right.
And he just wanted to do it. And well, I was watching the screen, and he began popping PVCs. And I said to him, Dr. Dill, we're going to have to stop you. And he shook his head and he said, go
Now,
on
what does
up."
that mean,
Well,
popping
those are,
PVCs?
they're premature beats, and when
Oh.
you start getting too many of them, it's
Oh,
not
you
a real
start
good
to
sign.
worry.
You want-
Yeah, okay.
So, and I said, Dr. Dill, I'm going to have to stop you. And man, he got angry, and you could see him. He was telling me to go up with the treadmill. So I saw myself, suddenly I was going to be a very famous person. I was the man who killed Dr. Dill. And so I finally said to him, Dr. Dill, you know more about this than I do. Last minute you shot 6 PVCs and I'm stopping the treadmill. And I did. And he got off and he really ate me out. And he said, I could have gone on, those are things, just that things that happened. But I thought at that time, well, I could have been very famous. But he was a fantastic man. And he used to talk to my classes, and I think they were so lucky to have had somebody like that, just to be able to say they knew him.
Yeah.
And he was vigorous right up to the time he died.
Larry, one of the final things I wanted to talk to you about was sort of your take on where we're at and where we may go, and sort of the state of the field and the state of ACSM and things like that. You've been in a long time. Some of your thoughts.
Well, I think we've got to continue to grow. I think the quality of the people who are joining, and some of the quality of the graduates in the universities, they are really great. I think that there are people now graduating with very, very good degrees in well-founded in science. What interests me, and obviously I'm a little biased, is the role that the fitness professional is going to take. And I think the summit has been going now for 10 years, and I think it's well established. The journal's been going for 10 years, and that's well established. And the circulation is getting bigger, and the attendance is getting bigger at the summit. And I think that in the next 10 years, we go to the summit, and that part of ACSM in the practical field is going to almost catch up completely with it. I would not be surprised the summit doesn't become the size of our annual meetings.
Yeah.
Because we're up now where last time we were in Las Vegas, it was 1,450 people.
Oh, wow.
And I think that in the next few years, we're going to see us slowly climb to 2,000. And then depending upon how good we are at planning good meetings, I think that we'll go higher than that. So I think, and although we've got one organization that competes with us a little bit, that was a spin-off organization, really in the field of, I belong to AHPR, American Health, Alliance of Health and Physical Education, longer than ACSM. But most of the people who are interested in science, then when ACSM started, moved, not necessarily dropped AHPR, I'm still an AHPR member, but moved over, and I haven't been to an AHPR meeting for years, because everything now is interested in. So almost everybody in sports medicine, exercise physiology, and that area, rehabilitation, is going to be in ACSM. And I think it's a great organization, and I think it's getting better.
Yeah, I do too. Okay, well, thank you, Larry, for spending some time with us this morning.
I've enjoyed it.
Time goes fast.
Yeah, that's fun.
It was nice of you to stop by and chat.
It was my pleasure.
I appreciate it very much.
My pleasure.